Hi everyone, Samuel here, welcome back. So it's been a year since I bought the Nikon ZF and I'm getting a lot of questions lately, like do you still use it, do you still like it? Is that a Z7? Does your ZF know about this? So last year when I bought the ZF, I went on a road trip, I made a first impression video and I feel like I said all there is to say about this camera. My feelings haven't changed much. And for a while it was also my main street photography camera, but then I started to use it less and less and it had become my backup camera when I shoot my personal projects. And then I needed a backup camera for my Nikon D850, which I also still use, but more for jobs or my personal projects. And that camera was the Nikon Z7 that I bought secondhand for around 1,400 euro. And yes, even though I call them backup cameras, sometimes it happens that I have to use all three of them at the same time. But then I really started to like the Z7 because it's more ergonomic, it has higher megapixels. I use manual focus lenses, so autofocus on this camera is great, but I didn't really make use of it, especially on the street. And then recently, just a few weeks ago, it started to get darker here in Hamburg, in Germany. As you see, it has already gotten darker since I started this video. So I'm using the ZF a lot more now, and I'm kind of falling in love with it again. So my idea for this video is I'm going to talk a little bit about my setup, what kinds of lenses I use, what kind of settings I'm using, especially for street photography, what I did to make this camera more comfortable to hold. And then I want to reflect a little bit on the projects I've been doing with this camera and the kind of work I'm getting out of this camera and how I feel about the images overall, how they feel, and also a little bit how this camera makes me feel when I take photos and how other people react towards me when I use this camera. Yeah, I guess this is a 1 year later review. These kinds of reviews are more useful than first impression videos anyways. So yeah, enjoy and let's go somewhere else because it's too dark. So, ich nehme mal kurz auf, fuchte mal mit den Händen. So let's talk about lenses. If you just want to do street photography with autofocus lenses, I recommend using the 28 2.8 and the 40 f2 prime lenses from Nikon. I have the SE versions and they are absolutely fine, sharp enough, autofocus is fast, fairly compact on the ZF, a little thick though. But how I like to use the ZF is with manual focus lenses. One lens that I really love is the Vogtländer 40mm f1.2. And I don't really use it for street photography that much because for me it's a specialty lens. It has a magic character. And I used it on the Denmark road trip David and we did last year. So if you want to see that, plenty of sample images. Gives me kind of that medium format look, but with a little bit more character. And I really love this lens. It also has a distance scale and infinity focus is really infinity focus. And if you want to use it for street photography, yeah, you can stop it down. It's super sharp. I just don't use it because I have a smaller lens for street photography. And it also makes the camera a little bit heavy. Now let's talk about my favorite lens, my main lens that I use on the ZF, and that is the Weipoch 28 1.4 Semera lens. This was given to me by Weipoch, not for this video, I made a video a long time ago. But the more I use it, the more I like it, and it has become my main lens because of several reasons. First of all, it has very nice distant markings for zone focusing, guessing your distances. And a lot of manual focus lenses have a distance scale, but this one has, 2, 3, 5, and 10, and then infinity. And that gives me so much more control, and the focus throw between 1 meter and infinity is quite long. So I can be very precise with this lens, and I really love that because I rarely miss a shot. The keeper rate on this lens is much higher than on other lenses that I have experience with. And this is the Leica M-mount version. They also make a Nikon Z-mount version, but I don't like how it looks. They just integrated an adapter into the lens and it looks kind of long and weird. I much more prefer using an actual adapter and the M-mount version because it makes the lens look a little shorter. And the Z-mount version has a traditional focus tab, and this one has this focus knob, which a lot of people don't like. But I actually really love it because you can lock the focus and then I can put it in my bag. It's always set to infinity. And I got so used to unlocking it. And for me, it also completes the retro look, it just really fits this ZF. In terms of adapters, I talked about this before. The best one to use for Leica M-mount lenses is the Vogtländer close focus adapter, which costs like 300 euro or 400 euros. It's very expensive. Let me know in the comment section if you know a better adapter or an adapter that also gets infinity focus right, because this is the only one so far I tested that gets the focus distances right, which is very important for me because I want to trust my distance markings. So this is my main lens. My second main lens is this one. This small little Voigtländer 40mm f2.8 Helia lens. This is another Leica M-mount lens, and without the lens cap, see how small this is? It has a nice look, black paint. This will age very well, and it's really sharp. If you stop it down, it's sharp. If you shoot wide open, it's sharp. On the edges, it has a little bit of a softness wide open, but the bokeh is also very characterful, has a little bit of the swirly effect. Yeah, definitely highly recommend this lens if you want a small street setup and you love 40mm. I love 40. I always shoot 28, 40. So this is definitely choice number 2. I forgot to mention there's another lens that I use, which is autofocus, and that is the 24-70 f4 Nikon Z mount lens. This was a recent purchase, and I wanted to have a clinical sharp lens, flexible zoom range that I can use for events, but also for street photography. If I just need one lens, weather sealed, really recommend it. It's a little heavy and long, but so flexible, super sharp. Contrast is amazing. Flare control is also very good. So that is another lens that I often use on this camera. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how I use this camera, and especially if I use the viewfinder or the screen, and do I tuck the screen away or do I open it and use it like this? The answer is I treat this as a film camera, so I use the viewfinder mainly, and I really love that they chose this kind of screen. I know a lot of people hate this because they think it's more for vloggers or people want to take selfies and film, but I think this was very smart from Nikon, because if this would be a regular tilting screen, you would always have the screen and you would be very tempted to look at the screen all the time. And because I'm able to hide my screen, and also it helps that I have this special edition which has this nice leather, it just feels more like a film camera, more like an analog experience. The viewfinder is also very nice and bright, very clear, and I never second guess myself if I should look at the screen or not. And it's very important in street photography that you also keep being in the moment and not check your photos, because you might miss a moment. So I like to shoot, and you have this EVF anyway, so you see the images you're getting. You see exactly what you're getting. So there's no need for me to check my images, right? And then later when I sit at a cafe or somewhere, I can open the screen and look at my images and then hide it again when I'm taking photos. And another thing that this allows me is to take photos at weird angles. For example, if I want to take a photo around a corner or take photos of my son in the back of my car, then this is very helpful because I can look at the screen and I don't have to move my body too much, and I can compose, take my photo. So it is useful, but you know, I like both types. I'm also okay with this kind of tilting screen, but on this camera, I really like to be able to shut my screen away. All right, let's talk about ergonomics, or the lack of any grip for your finger. So the ZF is very flat, as you can see, and this is a very hot debated topic online. A lot of people hate the ZF for its ergonomics. Most people buy a grip that you attach here, and then yeah, you have something to hold on to. But what is really lacking, in my opinion, is something for your thumb on the back. So as you can see here, I added this thumb rest. This is made out of wood. I bought this from a place called iWood Store, but you can also find this on eBay, AliExpress maybe. And the one I bought covered the whole leather piece here, but I cut it in half because it gives you a lot of grip, but it also makes the camera a little thicker. And by cutting it in half, you still feel the slim profile of the ZF. So I like this much better. There are also versions that are already small, but you know, I didn't want to buy another one. So in my experience, this is very sturdy. I used this for half a year. It didn't move at all. And if it comes off, then I just buy another tape and you know, fix it again. And as you see, it doesn't make the camera bulky and heavy. It's very light, and it gives me enough of a grip so I can use the ZF one-handed. It's the perfect position. You can still use the back dial. So in my opinion, best solution when you want to improve the grip. Obviously, don't use very long lenses. I still have an iWood Store grip that's also made out of wood that I would use if I use bigger lenses. But in my opinion, adding a grip onto this camera just makes this camera feel bigger and a little dorky, to be honest. I know a lot of people like these newer grips that have this red line, but I don't like how it looks. this is a much slicker solution, in my opinion. Ice latte in winter. All right, let's talk about settings. This is what you came here for, right? Wait. Okay, where was I? Yeah, AF or MF, I talked about this before. Manual focus is what I prefer on the ZF. It's just faster for me, more control. But let's talk a little bit about manual focusing, because this camera is known for its amazing focus assistant features. For example, you have a subject tracking in manual focus mode. To be honest, for street photography, I never use it, because subject tracking, it works when you have a person in front of you, when you take portraits, but with a lot of people moving in and out of your frame, it gets confused. And then every time I look through my finder, the focus point is somewhere I don't want it to be. So for that reason, I'm not using subject tracking. I've just used the middle focus point, and then I zoom in by using this button. I assign this AEL, AFL button to punch in 100%. I focus, and then I take my photo. Or, as I said, I look at my focus distance scale. When I take portraits, I might switch back to subject recognition or tracking, which I set into my My menu. This camera has not many customizable buttons, so the things I don't change too often is set to my My menu. Also, Auto ISO, I use Auto ISO. When I want to use manual ISO, I go to my My menu and then just turn Auto ISO off, and then I can use this dial as a regular ISO dial. It's okay, I use Auto ISO most of the time, so it's not a big deal. And then a very good feature, which unfortunately doesn't work on adapted lenses, I think you need to have contacts for that, and that is this button here. I assigned it to be highlight weighted metering, so when I hold down this button, the camera exposes for the highlights. And this is amazing, because there are moments where the camera exposes too bright, and I just want a silhouette or a more low-key image, and then I just press this, hold it, and then the camera turns down the exposure. And it's an amazing feature. I wish every camera could do that. The problem though is it only works with lenses that are connected to the camera via contacts. So for example, if I use my Vogtländer Z-mount lenses, it works. Of course, with all the autofocus lenses, it also works. But with this lens or my Helia Vogtländer, it doesn't work. Maybe this is something Nikon can implement via firmware update. That would be nice. Speaking of lenses that communicate with the camera, focus point confirmation. With my Vogtländer Z-mount lens, it works. It's great. You can see the focus point light up green, and then you know that you are in focus, which is super useful. You don't need to zoom in. But with these adapted lenses that have no communication, you don't get that. So Nikon, if you're watching, please allow us to have focus confirmation. That would be amazing. I don't know if that's possible, but it would be very nice. So let's continue with how I use this camera. The PASM dial here, the mode dial, where you can switch between manual mode, aperture priority, shutter priority, and program and auto, is very nice. First, I thought the way Fujifilm does it, by allowing you to set your dials to a position, is better, more intuitive, which it is, but it is also slower. Because let's say I want to shoot in this kind of conditions wide open. I set my lens to 1.4, and then I would have to adjust my other dials in order for the lens to correct for exposure. But I just switched to aperture priority, and now my camera exposes accordingly. On a Fujifilm camera, I would have to turn all my dials to auto in order to get aperture priority. Here I can just flick this switch, it's much faster. Then go back to manual, and then to f8, and I'm back to whatever shutter speed I had. For the way I shoot on the street, it's actually faster. Continuing talking about switches, the black and white switch, I love it, it's amazing, it's super convenient, because I shoot in black and white a lot, but also I want to shoot in color sometimes, and it's really handy to be able to visualize your frame by switching this switch. When I was in Denmark, and we did the road trip, I was shooting in black and white using the regular photo mode, but I set the black and white switch to activate a deep tone monochrome, which is basically a red filter black and white simulation. If you're a black and white photographer, you can have regular black and white and a red filter just by flicking a switch. For an experienced black and white photographer, this is like a game changer, because I see, you know, very red light, the sun is low. I know when I use a red filter, the sky will be very dramatic. And then I just use my black and white switch. If I want to go back to a more neutral black and white, back to regular photo mode. So yeah, love it a lot. Another custom feature I enabled on this camera is the display button. I didn't use it. The display button activates silent shutter. So you can hear it now, mechanical shutter, beautiful sound. I press the display button once. Oh, it's quiet. Yeah, unfortunately there are not many customizable buttons here. I wish this magnifying button could be assigned to something else, because I don't use it, because I use this. And whenever I switch from manifocus to autofocus, when I switch lenses, I have to go into my menu and reassign this button to back button 3D tracking, which is how I autofocus on this camera. For street photography, this is handy because I can focus and on my subject, release, and then I know my focus point is, my focus is locked. If I would use AF tracking on the shutter button as well, I would always have to focus again, you know? Warte mal ganz kurz. Sieht gerade ganz kurz mit dem Schatten hier, wie du da stehst. What else can I say? What else can we talk about? We talked about black and white. Color. For color, I use rich tone portrait. Beautiful. But my final image is not going to be rich tone portrait. I just use it to see my color preview. It's a beautiful profile. But when I edit my RAW files, I actually use Ricoh GR positive film profiles with my Nikon cameras. I talked about this on my channel before. I really love the cobalt image profiles. They are a little bit expensive, but they are the best emulation for other camera color profiles. So a little bit of Ricoh sprinkled on the Nikon files, and that gives me colors that I really like. Okay, these are my settings for street photography. Ta-da! Only took us 10 minutes? I don't know. 40 minutes. Okay, let's continue. Alright, taking a quick break here at this art installation. This is an homage to Johannes Brahms, the composer who lived here and worked here. So now I want to talk a little bit about the images this camera can create. How do they feel? How do people feel when they see me with this camera? And I think this is also a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the projects I have been photographing, where this camera was at least one of the main cameras. So first of all, this sensor is very capable, amazing dynamic range. You can lift up the shadows quite a lot. And the colors are very natural, but as I said earlier, I'm editing my RAW files in Photoshop using cobalt image profiles. But when I edit the files on the ZF, they're always super clean. Even ISO 6400, absolutely usable, even higher. You can go like 10,000, 12,000, 40,000 maybe, I don't know. And maybe it's because I'm using vintage or more vintage lenses than modern lenses on this camera, but this combination, you know, slightly vintage looking lenses with this sensor, I don't want to say organic, but yeah, it is organic. I will not say film-like because it's digital, but there's an organic quality. To be honest, it has more to do with the lenses. It should be obvious, but the look of your images depends more on your lenses than the camera. Okay, next let's talk about 24 megapixels. So I was always okay with 24 megapixels until I used the D850 and got the Z7 this year as well. Both of them have 45 megapixels, and I thought this is the sweet spot. 45, I can take photos of architecture, details, landscape, street photography. I can crop in a lot, and that's the point. I can crop in a lot, which for some people is a benefit. And to me it was a benefit as well, But to be honest, and now I'm going to expose myself, since using the Z7, I got very lazy with composing my images. I have been cropping my images quite a lot, more than I used to, because I can. And you know, it can work for certain scenes, it can work. Cropping can make an image better, but because I got so used to it, I was relying on it more and more, which in the end made my compositions a little sloppy, and it didn't really work a scene as I used to. So now going back to the ZF, I have to work a little harder to get my composition right. But to be honest, even 24 megapixels, if you crop it to, let's say, down to 16 megapixels, 16 megapixels is actually very good for upscaling. If you use Photoshop RAW, there's this super resolution feature, and I don't know why, but it does work especially well with images that have lower resolution. So if I crop this down to 16 megapixels, then I can still use super resolution to upscale it back to more like a 30 or 40 megapixel-ish range. But in the end, no one really does need more resolution. Unless you are like the most famous fine art photographer, landscape photographer, and you need to print huge, then yeah, go for these 60 megapixel sensors or Hasselblads. But it just makes no sense for me as a street photographer to use more than 40 or 24 megapixels. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how this camera makes me feel and makes others feel. First of all, it makes me feel very good. It's a fun camera. It's a camera that is pure photography. You have the dials, you have manual focus. I feel like other people also feel less threatened by me when I take photos. You know, when you walk around the city with a Leica camera, other photographers usually stop you and want to talk about your camera, right? And I don't get that with this camera. Other photographers leave me alone, which is perfect because I don't want to be interrupted when I take photos. Yeah, this for me is another plus point. Also a benefit of these retro-inspired cameras is that you can set up your camera before you even turn it on. So for example, if I walk into a coffee shop, it's darker, I adjust my shutter speed, my aperture, and then I'm ready. You know, when I go out, I can adjust again. In that aspect, I like more than just the looks of the camera. 10 minutes later, Samuel here, I forgot to talk about the projects I have been photographing with this camera. So the first one I've started working on was last year when I discovered that there's this tradition in Lower Saxony, in my region, which is called Fastlam. And it's basically like carnival, but a little different. And I wanted to document it, so I befriended another club and documented the preparation phase. So they would meet at farms, and then they would build these huge wagons. And for that I was using my D850, but also the ZF with the Nocturne 40, for example, or the Z-mount 40 f2. And yeah, it worked flawlessly. It was the perfect camera for that. And I'm going to continue doing that next year. Another project that I worked on for half a year, which is actually just about to start. I just did a warm-up. And that is a project about a marksman club, also in Lower Saxony, which is something that is totally foreign to me. This world of tradition and gun shooting and these uniforms, this vest. And to be honest, I was also a little scared approaching them or this topic, because I'm a foreign-looking guy, you know, living in the German countryside, and you know, these clubs usually full of Germans. I didn't know how they would feel about me. But then I was contacted by my car dealer who just joined this club. He was asking me if I would be available to take an anniversary group photo. They were celebrating 75 years of their club. And then it got me thinking, you know, maybe we should do more. So I told him that I would do it for free, but I would also love to get to know them, see what they're doing. Yeah, and then I have been visiting them quite frequently and photographing the whole anniversary as well. And I used all my Nikon cameras for that project, my D850, Z7, ZF, all together at the same time as well. And I'm still figuring out what I want to do with them. And I heard that the women in this club are celebrating their 50 years anniversary this year, next year. And they already told me they need me to photograph it. So who knows, maybe next year the real project develops. And of course I'm going to use my ZF for that as well. Oh, an interesting little side story. The first day when I came to visit them, I had the ZF with my Vogtländer 40 Helia lens, which looks even more old school, right? And then a few of them were actually very interested in this camera. They were like, oh, I see, you're shooting film? And that was good because that was kind of an icebreaker. You know, a lot of old folks in these clubs. So they appreciated that I was using something retro looking, even though it was digital. Moin! Nice, nice. Someone had a nice camera. Time to answer some community questions. I asked you on YouTube what you want to know about the ZF, and let's go through a few of them here. I can't promise to answer every question. Had a Z5 and now have a Z6 II. I think about buying the August. Okay, basically the question was, what's the difference in terms of ergonomics, Z7 or Z6 compared to ZF? Of course, the Z7 is much more comfortable. That's why I often pick that one over the ZF, especially when you use longer lenses or my 24-70 zoom. For me, the Z7 body is basically perfect. But I would pick the ZF obviously because of the controls. It inspires me more to take photos. Yeah, so that's another reason. Next question from Brooklyn Linda. What's up? Always a loyal subscriber. I already answered her question, but in short, she's asking if the ZF is still worth it. And yeah, the answer is obviously it's still worth it in 2024. I don't think Nikon will update this camera very soon because it's a niche camera. It might take another 5 to 10 years, so I wouldn't wait. Just get it if you like it, if you want it. No regrets. Here's an interesting question, which is which lens for Nikon Z is similar to the character of the Fujinon XF35 1.4? And this person also says the Nikon 51.8 is too sharp and the pictures are boring. I agree. I used to own that lens. I sold it for that reason. It's just too boring. It's very difficult to answer that because I don't really shoot 50. But recently I was in Paris and I met the Daipoch people, and I tried the 50mm f2 Eureka lens that they have. And that had very nice character, a little bit of a swirly bokeh. So maybe this could be an alternative to the 35 1.4. That would be my best guess. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comment section if you have a better lens suggestion. Okay, one more before we move on. This one is from Marcin Kosowski. Hi Samuel, please mention what's your take on the Nikon 28-2.8 for the ZF. Do you still have it? Is it worth it? I much prefer the Daipoch, but I remember you have the Nikon. Yeah, two very different lenses. The Nikon 28-2.8, very solid lens. If you like autofocus, get that one. No problems. It's sharp, good contrast. Stop down, super sharp. Even on my Z7, crazy sharp. It lacks a little bit of micro contrast, and if you shoot against the sun, you can get some flares and you lose contrast. The Daipoch is, you know, fully manual. You have the distance scale. It's heavier, it feels more premium. It's a different shooting experience. And in terms of character, I like this one wide open. Stop down is just very sharp. But it does some weird things when you shoot against the sun. I don't really like how this acts when you shoot against the sun. It has a very unique lens flare that is hard to get rid of. I stopped using UV filters, but still, this lens does flare sometimes, which can be a benefit depending on what you prefer. Yeah, the 28 Nikon, solid lens. I don't use it because this one is more fun. Okay, it's time to end this video. This was my 1 year later review, or my settings video, or whatever I'm going to call this video. Yeah, very much in love with this camera still. And I'm actually falling in love with this camera again, because now it's winter, the light is beautiful, but also it's getting dark faster. And so this is great for low light. And in terms of wishes for a Mark II version, maybe higher megapixels, even though I'm totally fine with 24, but 45, that would be an upgrade for me. Other than that, maybe CF Express card slot with the SD as a second card slot. And a joystick. Yeah, a joystick on the back, and then that would be it. Maybe a little slimmer body, but yeah, I can recommend it. If you have any more questions about this camera, let me know in the comment section and I will try to answer them. I'm going to take some more pictures now because the light is beautiful, and I see you soon. Boom. Ah!